What's up guys, and welcome to another Porsche GT car video. Today we're comparing the 981 generation GT4 against the 991.1 generation GT3. This has been a comparison that's eluded me for some time, and the reason it's so interesting is because these two cars came out around the same time. Both were marketed as more hardcore track variants of their base Cayman and 911 counterparts. But which one is actually better to drive? A 981 GT4 goes for around $90,000 to $120,000 depending on mileage and spec, whereas the 991.1 GT3 goes for right around $120,000 to $150,000. So is the additional $30,000 worth it from a driving dynamics perspective? This GT4 is a car I've driven before. It's definitely a very special spec. Carbon everywhere, Alcantara wheel, Porsche bucket seats. It's a great looking interior. The only mod Bai has done is a top gear header, so it should open up the sound quite a bit. So a few specs about the GT4: we're powered by the 3.8 liter naturally aspirated flat six from the 991.1 Carrera S, but it's actually been detuned a bit to 385 horsepower. Rev limiter comes in at 7,800, red line is 7,600, 309 pound-feet of torque. The car weighs a little over 3,000 pounds. McPherson strut suspension. We do have adaptive Porsche active suspension management dampers. 6-speed manual transmission was the only available transmission for the 981 generation. Of course, the later 982 or 718 came with an optional PDK. Electric power steering for the 981, the first generation of Cayman to have this over the previous hydraulic setup. Limited slip differential out back. Let's remind ourselves why the GT4 is one of the best cars you can buy for $100,000 or thereabouts. All right, we're gonna put it into sport mode, exhaust valve open. And we're gonna leave the suspension in the softer setting because the road is very damp out here today. Really long second gear, always been a complaint of mine. Oh wow, this header really opens up that top end sound. Yeah, we're just in second gear, in the middle of the rev range because it's so long. Get out of second gear here. It goes up to 82 miles an hour, I believe. Brake feel is so good. Such a solid brake pedal. Linear and progressive feeling. You know what? Say what they will about this electric power steering rack being a downgrade from the old hydraulic rack, but the precision is still spectacular, and the actual feedback through the wheel is not bad. Oh yes, that mid-engine balance. The car just loves to turn. This car just has a super pointy front end. Ooh. Suspension's a little bit unsettled. This is a very bumpy road. You know what? This engine, in a vacuum, it's spectacular. It revs out to almost 8,000 RPM, makes a great sound, has great throttle response. But I have a feeling that the 991.1 GT3 engine is going to feel like a whole new ball game of response and power delivery. But I'll reserve judgment for when we get behind the wheel. Right now, I'm loving every bit of this GT4. Such a great car. So easy to heel toe. The pedal placement is really just ergonomically perfect for hard driving. Oh wow, this second gear really is long though. Not a whole lot of opportunities to actually enjoy this 6-speed manual transmission. On track it's probably fine, but on a tight road, kind of just stuck in second. but only when you provoke it. That's the thing with the GT4. It's such a fantastic car that comes alive when you push it to the limit, but it really does have a dual personality to it. Drive it at 8/10 up to 10/10, and this car is absolutely phenomenal. But just around town or as a daily driver, it really does not have a lot of character. It's a little too clinical. I believe that's the word I used the last time I drove a GT4, and that's the best way to describe it. It's almost too good. Everything is so precise and everything is tuned to work together so well that the car doesn't naturally want to misbehave. You really have to poke it and prod it to make it feel exciting. And maybe that's what you want in your Porsche GT car. You want to be able to drive it around serenely, not make a fuss, and then on the weekend, take it on a back road, take it to the racetrack, and really feel it come alive. As we're demonstrating right here. Oh yes, I love the brake pedal feel. One of my favorite parts of the Porsche GT car experience. People talk about the engine all the time, but the brakes, they're just as impressive. Ah, yes. The brakes are what give me the confidence to push. What a car, the GT4. I know I've been talking about potentially selling my NSX recently. This is one of those cars I've been looking at and thinking to myself, if I could do a one-for-one trade, my NSX for a GT4, that might be the move. And when I drive this car on a canyon road, I'm reminded why I have those thoughts. It's just so technically brilliant. It is a pure driver's car in every sense of the term. The gearing could be shorter. I know Sharkworks makes a kit to shorten the gearing to make the car feel a lot more alive at lower speeds, and while that sounds great, the cost is just so prohibitive, and you're really, you know, looking at Porsche 991.1 GT3 territory once you factor in the price of a GT4 plus the short gears. So the natural question is, should you just spring for the GT3? That's what we're going to try to answer. All right, guys, we're now in the 2015 991.1 GT3. This is its owner, Steven. And this is a track car for you, right? 55,000 miles. You said you bought it at what, like 26?
Yep, bought it at 26.
And so you street this car a bit, or is it mostly just a track car for you?
It was my daily for 2 years, and then recently got another car. But yeah, it's kind of double duty.
What mods have you done to this, if any?
So it's mostly stock, just an alignment. So fronts are -2.5, and then rears -2. Front brake pads and tires, that should be it.
And you can achieve that front camber with just the stock lower control arms, right?
That's correct.
Right. Because I know a lot of like base 911 owners or Carrera owners will get the GT3 control arms just to be able to have that camber adjustment. So we're powered here by a 3.8 liter naturally aspirated flat six, same displacement as the one in the GT4, but this is the full fat GT3 engine. Again, the GT4 engine is just a slightly detuned Carrera S engine from the 991.1. This one is a bespoke engine built specifically for the GT3 and GT3 RS. So it makes 475 horsepower, 325 pound-feet of torque. And look at that, 9,000 RPM redline. Also love this red tack. That is badass looking. We have an aftermarket steering wheel here, thicker grip than the OEM one, and it's more grooved. And we have these much larger carbon paddle shifters. The OEM ones are like that big. I actually really like using the PDK shifter from this gen to shift, since it's pull to upshift, push to downshift. 7-speed PDK, no manual option. The car weighs a bit more than the GT4. I believe it's 3,200 and change. We're on some Advan 8009 tires, so they're a 200 tread wear. Should be comparable to a Cup 2, more or less, in terms of grip. The GT4 we just drove, I found out after I drove it, it has PS4S tires, so quite a bit less grip. We also have PASM adaptive dampers here. These are standard, and Porsche Sports exhaust. Second gear. Actually, let's start in first gear. Why not? Wow. This engine's on a whole different plane of existence than that GT4 engine. Using this thing as if I'm like a rally driver, you know?
Sequential.
Yeah. You know, I'm feeling the car moving around. It's quite lively. This engine, oh my god, the top end's just totally like in a different universe. The zinginess of it. Even the 991.2 GT3 engine doesn't have that high-pitched shriek at the top end as you approach 9,000. Oh, the PDK is so flawless. It has a punchiness to the shift that even, we were just talking about this off camera, but the ZF8 speed and a lot of BMWs and the Supra, it's fast, but it doesn't give you that punch. The shift action isn't as snappy. That's what I love about the PDK. The steering feel is actually quite good as well. You know, people complain about the 991 GT3 and the 981 GT4 moving to EPS, but honestly, having driven both of these cars now, the steering is still one of the highlights of the car. Little straight line pull here. Oh my god. That never gets old. Never gets old. Oh yes. You know, it's interesting. Compared to the GT4, this car actually feels like it's more up on its tippy toes. It wants to move around a bit more. I think part of that is because even in the softer suspension setting, this car feels way stiffer than the GT4. There's less compliance. It feels like there's less rubber in the suspension. And that makes it, you could argue, not ideal for a damp canyon road like this one, but you can't argue with the fact that it makes it really exciting to drive. Oh, the brakes are fantastic, just like the GT4s. So much pedal feel and modulation in that pedal. Drenched in sweat right now. I just noticed. This car is so fantastic. It gets my heart pumping. And you know what? Leaving it in PDK Sport Auto, probably it would shift just as well, if not better than me on my own in terms of the timing of the shifts and everything. But a car like this, you want to feel alive. You want to feel like you're, you know, putting in some work. And so having this, you know, flipped over to the left, pretending like I'm a rally driver, you know, ripping the downshifts and upshifts. It's just so much fun. One of the most fun to drive cars I've ever driven that's not a manual. And that's not to say that every manual car is more fun than this, obviously not, but I'm saying like even some of the best manual transmission cars I've ever driven, the NSX, the S2000, other cars with, you know, just really slick manuals, this PDK doesn't make me miss that. And I remember when the 991.1 GT3 first came out, everyone was boo-hooing it, you know, because gone is the manual, electric power steering now. Somehow everyone thought that it made this car a lot less of a driver's car and a lot less raw. But when you actually get behind the wheel and you drive it hard, all of that sort of, not only does it not matter, but I don't think it's true. Like, this steering still has a ton of feedback. It might not be as alive with, you know, every little nuance of the road surface coming through the wheel compared to like a manual rack or like a hydraulic rack, but compared to basically everything else, it's one of the best steering racks. All right, we'll use the paddles real quick. Suspension's bumpy though. Yeah. Even in the softer setting, we're being jostled around all over the place. The GT4 didn't do that quite as much. I know both cars have the same front suspension setup, but this feels just that little bit sharper. It's more hardcore than the GT4 in every single way. And most importantly, how can you argue with this? Oh man, this engine, okay, the first time I drove a GT4 was the first time I had driven any sort of GT car. This is several years back. And at that time I was like, this engine is phenomenal. It's the best naturally aspirated engine I've ever driven. This puts that engine to shame. The difference in response and that power delivery at the top end, but, and this is a big but, that comes with a caveat, which is the engine reliability issues with these cars, right? And that's where I want to end this video. A quick little discussion on ownership of a 991.1 GT3 specifically, because these cars were known to have, still are known to have, pretty catastrophic engine failures. Not only when you track them, but even when you just daily drive them. So let's talk through that, because this is a 2015 model year. After these engine issues started becoming prevalent post-release, Porsche actually reinstated sort of a 10-year extended warranty for owners, right? Yep. Well, it's 2024 now. A lot of owners and their cars are nearing the end of that warranty period. So are you worried?
Yeah, definitely worried. Something I think you gotta understand going in and buying the car. I think there's advantages, as in, you know, the price is a little bit lower. And I did get this engine replaced, so it did blow up around 31,000 miles.
So you blew up the first generation engine,
correct? Right? It was an E-Series, I believe, and then it switched to a new G6, and supposedly that's like kind of the latest and greatest for the .1s. No reported failures thus far, but I think it's probably just too low of a sample size to know. You're definitely taking a risk with it.
Yeah.
So warranties end this year, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. As fantastic of a driving experience as this is, just know what you're getting into. That's not to say, you know, it's a ticking time bomb by any means, but there's always going to be that little bit of a worry in the back of your head with a 991.1, and that's reflected in the price of these. I mean, compare this to a .2, which is still commanding what, like 180-ish plus?
Yeah, for a nice one, yeah.
Yeah, versus a .1, which I would argue is like 95% the same driving experience, but these are going for what, 125 to 150 more or less?
Roll of the dice.
Yeah, it's a roll of the dice, but I'll say one thing, and that's where I'm going to leave this video, is as a driving experience, as an emotional car, it is easily worth $30,000 more than the GT4. That's not to take a single thing away from the GT4, but you get what you pay for. And with that, a big thank you to Steven. Thank you again. And a big thank you to Bai for letting me review his GT4 for the second time. Let me know what you guys think of this comparison. Which would you spend your money on? Is the GT3 really worth the extra 30 grand or so? Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.